How's it going there, guys? In this video, I'm going to give you 5 predictions which I think are going to come true in some way or another in the next 5 years in astrophotography and astronomy in general. And I'm talking really in the consumer section of the market here. I'm not talking really about professional observatories and that kind of thing, but here are my 5 predictions. Now, I will say this as well. I would absolutely love to hear if you have predictions for the next 5 years as well, because I've been doing this a long time, astrophotography, and I've been trying my best to pay attention and observe for any trends that are happening, changes, the way things are going in general. Obviously, we all try to pay attention to that kind of thing. I think it's just human nature, but certainly, I think there's a way that things are headed, and for me, I'm going to start with point number 1. That is, smart telescopes are taking over the lower end of the market completely, and I think it's going to just continue that way and maybe boom even more than it already has. There's a few gaps in the market, which we're going to talk about as well, but in particular, I think the next revision of smart telescopes, the first group that came out, are fantastic and selling so well. But I think the next revisions that come out are probably going to be most things to most people. It's going to be a catch-all kind of group of products. And I think that's what's going to really fuel some more growth later on for those kinds of people when they want the next step up the astrophotography ladder, if you will. So it's fair to say that the smart telescope, the StarS50 in particular, is the best-selling smart telescope on the market. And it's with good reason, because it's so capable, it can do so much, and it's at it's not that offensive price point, you know what I mean? £540. It's still expensive enough that it's not really in the realms of impulse purchase for many people out there, and I think that's possibly going to change. I think we might see this gap in the market down here, where we see products starting at 420 really for true smart telescopes, and then it's kind of nothing below that. I think we will start to see some products coming in around £300, maybe a little less at some point. What they'll look like, who they'll be made by, I don't know, but I really can see them coming in, and I think they would sell well if they're anywhere near as good as these kind of crop of sensors are that's in these things and what they can do. But the next revisions of the sea stars, for example, the next revision of the dwarf, who knows what else is in production from other companies coming up. We're going to see this middle part of the market filled too. So you see the smart telescope, the StarS50, £540. The next smart telescope up from that is £1,400. So there's this huge gap. It's got to get filled by something. So I think that's another gap naturally that's going to become packed with products on offer, such as maybe a StarS50 Pro. I think we already know there's a StarS30 Pro on the way at some point or another. I don't see why they wouldn't do the same for the S50. Probably, it seems like to me that we might see something like a StarS70 or S60 or whatever it looks like. There's certainly room there to put something like that and it still be reasonably affordable. Certainly more affordable than most of the higher end smart telescopes, which for me, yeah, they look good, but it's getting on towards hard to recommend. I think for a beginner to spend that much money on something, it's a much easier recommendation to get something like a C Star, for example, because there's a huge community behind them as well. When ZWO released these, I don't think they had any idea kind of that they just opened Pandora's box with this, because they sold so well that they had trouble holding stock for, as far as I remember, like more than a year basically before they could really get it nailed down and start shipping these fast enough. So it kind of took everybody by surprise a bit. I remember you had to get your name on pre-order lists and stuff like that in order to just buy one. Don't think the same can be said when something comes out that's more like £3,500–4,000. It's naturally more exclusionary due to its price bracket. But yeah, I think that's the first prediction. We're going to see a boom in the low to mid region of the spending market for astrophotography gear, and it's going to be taken up by smart telescopes in particular. Now, leading me on to my next point, I've just used a couple of images from Trevor Jones, by the way, Astro Backyard. Please check him out if there's any chance at all that you haven't already, which I think is low, as he's such a popular chap and with good reason. But This is from Astro Backyard, these two images. I hope you won't mind me using them. Just to illustrate my second prediction, and that is, I think, while we're going to see a boom in smart telescopes, I think we're going to see a bit of a regression in the market for dumb telescopes and dumb equipment, if you will. So from my perspective, let's say if a family member came to me and said, hey Luke, you're into astrophotography, what do you recommend for my my first gear? And I say, okay, get a C-Star S50, and they're like, no, I want a proper rig, whatever that means. Okay, so it has to be a traditional setup. They don't already have a DSLR. I'm going to have a really, really hard time, you know, giving them hand-on-heart, honest advice and recommending something like this to them. There's nothing wrong with the mount and things like that, but I'm on about the component parts. Am I really going to say to them, right, you're going to need this guide scope, and you're going to need this guide camera, and you're going to need this main camera, and you're going to need this field flattener, and you're going to need this bunch of different cables, you're going to need a computer to control it all, by the way, if you don't already have one, and then you're going to need to get all this software downloaded and installed and familiarize yourself with it before you could even take your first picture. It's a hard sell. I wouldn't want to do that to someone. Do you know what I mean? Not when we have stuff like this. Like, it just in my mind supersedes kind of the dumb equipment, if you will, in many ways. For someone starting out, if you're already established, it doesn't matter. Buy whatever you want at whatever price point fits, right? But for someone starting out in particular, I would, like, almost 100% of the time be recommending them something like this, a smart camera, where they can pair it with the telescope and be up and running with the minimum of fuss and with equal results to the harder way of doing things. Do you know what I mean? It's just, I don't see any way that this goes backwards now. We have these things, a smart camera where, you know, you can have your main camera, your guide camera, your guiding system, in fact, all in one. You're going to be guiding to your main optic. You communicate with it wirelessly, so through your interface device, which you're naturally familiar with. It's your phone or your tablet, you know, these things we use every day. Most of us day in, day out, many hours a day, so it's not much of a leap to get into that kind of thing. The software is incredibly friendly. It talks you through stuff. It's all user-friendly and low friction. It makes it much easier to recommend, and even not just for a beginner, but now going for me, for example, someone who's experienced with this stuff, that element of friction, if you like, with traditional setups still exists to some degree. So if I'm running 2-3 rigs on a night, truth be told, I don't want to be running PC-based software on all 3 or something like that. I would much rather have maybe 1 rig running PC software and then 2 others, for example, running smart cameras like this, because every single time I put that camera out, it's just done its job, and I've gone to collect it later on that night, and there's just been a bunch of usable data and no headache. So for me, personally speaking, that's what I'm looking for when I'm putting out a second telescope. I'm doing it because I want more data, right, or more targets. I'm not looking for a fight to get into a grappling match with my telescope and start pulling hair out. I just want it to work, and that's usually, you know, touch wood, what it does. I can't always say the same for PC-based software. When it's working, it's working. There's no two ways about it. But more often than not, a closed environment like this works better, and that's just the way it is, generally speaking. Now, the argument against all-in-ones like that is, you know, that what if one part of it goes wrong? And I understand that, because it will happen occasionally, right? It's naturally going to happen. Hardware failures do, and when it does, it takes out everything else. Most likely, you know, if your guide camera's out, you're kind of stuffed, even if you can still use the rest of the gear. That would still be true if you'd got all separate gear and you could just replace the part that broke. But I'll ask you this, I mean, when was the last time your phone just randomly gave up, or some other equally complicated piece of hardware, like your personal computer, your laptop or something? For me, touch wood again, for the second time tonight, it's never happened. I think hardware these days is more reliable than it's really ever been. Failures do still happen, of course they do, but I don't think it's a regular occurrence really quite so much as it used to be at one point. So yeah, it's certainly not something that keeps me awake at night. And I think we're not done, by the way, with stuff like this. I don't see any reason at all why we won't see further iterations come out with perhaps an inbuilt electronic rotator rather than the bolt-on. option. I don't see why we couldn't have a version with an electronic micro focuser or something like that, because many of these scopes that you're going to pair them with don't really care about back focus being any particular amount. It's just when you're in focus, it's correct. It's Pet's val, you know what I mean? So that'd be a great option for many, many, many scopes out there already, and I can see that being popular, basically. Maybe it's just me, but I think there's no way we go backwards from these now that these are starting to come out and they're priced quite well. More and more people are going to get them, and they're going to have that level of expectation for gear going forwards, and it's just kind of not delivered on if you try to do things the traditional way. Progress, you know what I mean? Things are moving forwards. At least that's what I think is happening. And moving on to the next point, anyway, of smarter and AI kind of stuff. Currently, and I think in the future too, by the way, I will say that right now, the absolute best software out there is really hands-on stuff. It's like PixInsight and AstroPixel processor, and realistically, these are what you're going to have to use too going forwards in the future if you want the absolute total last drop of juice from the fruit. When you're really trying to get the most out of your data, it needs to be done by hand and by eye, all pretty much manual manipulations through stuff like this. Yeah, it's all data driven and it's feedback driven from what you're seeing on the screen, but experience and comfortable, you know, application of tools within these programs is what's going to get you absolute best results. And that won't change. But I think in the future, prediction number 3 is going to be, we're going to see a AI-powered post-processing suite, maybe a stacking suite as well, come out that's a standalone program that can do 90% of what these programs can do. I really strongly think that this will happen. If someone isn't already developing this, you should be, because I'm pretty much convinced it's $1 million idea. If you could come out with something that's most things to most people and can do the job in a few clicks. Now, we already have something that looks a bit like that, and let's say within the C-Star app or the Dwarf app, there's kind of a partial processing thing that it can apply, where it'll run it through some stretching algorithm, it'll run it through kind of a noise reduction AI tool, and it will partially process your data for you. But I don't see any reason why someone can't come up with an almost fully fledged standalone program that will take any data you throw at it and just try to get the best out of it. And I think that'd be incredibly, incredibly popular for the same reasons that smart telescopes are popular. Most people just aren't looking for a fight and a headache and a new, extremely difficult thing to tackle, because this software isn't that friendly to learn. Yes, it's intuitive enough once you get used to it, but that's a bit of a backwards statement, I think. It took me a lot of time to get sort of proficient with it. And now part of my driving factor with my channel and stuff is to try to save people from that same fate that I had, where I was just clueless, man. I didn't know what I was doing with PixInsight, and it was so frustrating to start with. And I nearly quit. And if I had done, it'd have been the biggest mistake I probably ever made in my Astro career. So I'm glad I didn't. Glad I stuck with it, but it was close for a while there. So, without people trying to help lower the barriers, stuff like this, it's naturally limiting itself as to who's going to bother to actually learn it and use it. So that's why there's another gap in the market for prediction number 3. Now, next up, I want to talk to you a little bit about cameras now, and I think this is. It almost shocked me a bit when I looked at this earlier on. So the current upper end crop of cameras, if you'll excuse the crap pun, the IMX455, the 571, the 533, and the 585, for example, like the stuff that we recognize as the best sensors out there, really, for most stuff right now. And 0 amp glow, very low read noise, almost no dark current to speak of. And very high quantum efficiency as well. They're kind of old. Some of them are anyway, not so much the IMX 585, but the 571 came out in 2018. It's 7 years old at this point. I could not believe that when I saw it. I think we're due a refresh. You know, naturally, I think we are probably due a refresh of these sensors at some point. What that will look like, what they'll be, and what specs they'll have, I don't know. I can only suspect that they're just going to have better across the board specs in most measurable categories than the current crop of sensors has. At least that's what I'd hope. But there's a ceiling there, as far as I understand it. IMX571, it's a very, very good sensor, and yes, there's room for improvement, but let's say if we bump up across the board sensitivity by 10%, we're going to get at its peak very, very close to 100% quantum efficient. Here we have relative response, so this is relative to 100. I think it's about 92% or something quantum efficient at its absolute peak, the mono version. Imagine now in a decade or so when we have a camera that's 100% or maybe less, 100% or close to it. Everything else has moved up relative to that. Where do we really go from there? I think we start to see the peak obviously remains at 100, and then the stuff around it creeps up until eventually we've got pretty much photon counting machines available to us, and that is what I view as the future of cameras coming up. But part of that, I think we have to accept, these cameras have been out 7 years and they're still fantastic, but there's been a deceleration in development, it seems like, for these consumer grade sensors that are available. We're seeing lots and lots of innovation in machine vision cameras, obviously, because there's lots of applications for them. You know, cars and things like that, they're going to need ever better sensors that can see better than we can imagine for safety reasons. That's going to drive things along. We're going to see phones, you know what I mean? That kind of thing, getting better and better sensors as time goes on, because they're just so popular. You know, millions and millions and millions of units sell. I don't think you can say that millions and millions and millions of DSLRs are selling these days, or mirrorless cameras, I think it's probably more accurate to say, are selling these days. Quite probably for the reason I'm about to say, just in most cases, unless you're a professional, 99% of the time, I know that gets pulled out of the air a lot of times, but I think it's probably accurate in this case. Your phone is going to take a picture that's more than good enough for what you want. You've always got it with you in your pocket. It's not heavy, it's not cumbersome to carry around or anything like that, and it's not an additional expense. We all have phones, really. So where's the incentive nowadays, really, to buy a high quality mirrorless camera or something like that, unless you're an enthusiast? And that group is never going to be as big as the group of people who all have phones, like everybody out there. So I think that's why we're seeing deceleration in such as the APS-C, the full frame sized sensors that are becoming available. And that's probably why it's taken so long before we're even talking about a refresh, really. Like I say, when that refresh happens, anyway, my big prediction here, I'm going to finally give you it. The next cameras that come out, I think we're going to have them even longer than this group of cameras that we've had. So this has been currently 7 years. Who knows how long it'll be by the time we change them. I would not be surprised if the next group of cameras that comes out, the IMX571 version 2, whatever it's going to be, we might have it for a decade before the next thing comes along to replace it, unless there's some major change in technology that enables better and better cameras. So that's prediction number 4. I think we're seeing that kind of slowdown at the upper end. We could probably see really incredible inch-sized sensors starting to come out along the vein of the 585, but even better, because that kind of inch-sized thing is getting used in a lot of stuff now. Now, to finish on a lighter point, if you'll just allow me that last crap pun, I promise I'll stop there. But this is a nice prediction to have for you. I think we might have possibly, I'm being hopeful here, gone over the threshold of light pollution being as bad as it'll ever be. I think we might be on the down ramp now, where light pollution is getting better as time goes on, rather than continually worse. Now, I know there's going to be lots of people out there going, my area is definitely worse. Yeah, you'll be right. But on the whole, I think that as lighting's becoming more advanced, and in particular, I never thought I'd really be one for more regulations, but I think as environmental regulations tighten as time goes on, they're going to start to apply, more broadly speaking, to more parts of the environment. So as it is, a lot of attention gets paid, of course, to things like emissions. Just for example, light in itself is an emission. If you want to look at it that way, it's another nuisance thing that's entering the atmosphere, and it's disrupting human life and nature. And I think we are going to see within the next 5 years tighter environmental regulations on light pollution, and that's going to lead to darker and darker skies for quite a while to come. Now, it's going to be compounded with another effect that's happening, where just by the nature of progress, the later model LEDs that we're seeing put in street lights, for example, that kind of thing, are far better shielded than they ever were, and they're much more reasonable in the light output than, let's say, the earlier LED street lamps, which were sometimes just so hilariously bright they're practically melting the tarmac beneath them on a night, whereas now they're not kind of designed to dazzle. They're just bright enough, bright as they need to be, kind of thing, which is energy efficient, but also light efficient. You know, it's not putting out too much extra light, which is just hitting the road and then uselessly illuminating the underside of bats' wings and stuff like that, and angry astronomers' telescopes. To try to show you what I'm talking about, by the way, I know this is just one thing, and maybe you'll have some anecdotes, like I definitely do, for this, but just for example, if we take a look right here at Rotterdam, Antwerp, etc., we take a look at VERS, this overlay for light pollution, 2012. All right, add more than a decade on, 12 years, fair enough. But that's a lot better than it was if we just cycle back and forth. I don't know whether it's the granularity of the map or what, but I will tell you this. I come from around about Leeds here, so we do the same thing. 2012, 2024. I believe it. My locations definitely ended up darker over the past few years, and a lot of that has been down to street lamps being changed from high pressure sodium to LEDs. And yes, LEDs are broad spectrum light source. It's unfilterable by its nature. Fair enough. But it's also less bright. I don't like using light pollution filters, and my images have definitely got better. Not just as a result of the skies getting darker. Obviously, it's me getting better equipment, better processing tools coming out. There's a lot of factors that go into it. It's not just change from, you know, high pressure sodium street lamps to LEDs, but it's played a part, and I think it's only going to get better, like I say, as time goes on. And that's a nice point to finish on. So do let me know, by the way, if your area's gone better or worse. I'm sure we're going to hear both sides of the coin on that one, but at least mine's a happy story. I'm sure many of them out there are. So that's been my 5 predictions. I do have more, but I thought I'd just keep this well, I was going to say brief, but I've just looked and this is 24 minutes long or so. So I'll wrap it up there and just say I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you don't think it's too crazy. Only time will tell if I am crazy or not with this one. But yeah, if you do have predictions of your own, I'd love to hear them. Like I said, genuinely I would. I'll read every single comment and try to reply to everybody as well, as I always do. And let's have it. Let's see what you guys think is going to happen in the next 5 years. So I hope you've enjoyed that one. It's been a lot of fun to talk about and get these thoughts kind of put together and out in the air from this this long free-form video. If you've enjoyed this kind of format of video, do let me know as well. I'm always experimenting with new stuff. So thank you. All in all, thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. So until then, look after yourselves and clear skies.